Welcome to the wonderful world of program evaluation. I hope you're going to enjoy this journey with me through this course, and I hope you'll find it practical and useful as well. First, let's talk about what evaluation is. You can see that evaluation is all about valuing. You see that the two words, evaluation and valuing, have very similar cores and roots. The basic definition of program evaluation was given by Scriven back in 1967 as simply judging the merit or worth of something. However, the authors of our textbook have refined that a bit to also include the fact that the evaluator needs to identify, clarify, and apply defensible criteria for making those value judgments. It's not just enough to make a judgment. We have to be able to defend the criteria we used for making the judgment. What was that based on? So what sorts of things do we actually evaluate? In general, we evaluate programs, policies, or products, like textbook series or curriculums. In the U.S., though, the term program evaluation is used generically to describe evaluations of all three of these kinds of objects. We don't generally talk about product evaluation or policy evaluation separately from program evaluation. We lump them all together into the same field. Evaluation objects are also called evaluands, so you might come across that in the evaluation literature, so just be aware of that word. So if evaluation, as Scriven said, is about judging the worth or merit of something, what is worth and merit? First, let's talk about merit. Merit asks the question, does an evaluand do what it's designed to do? Let me give you a practical example. In the late 90s, I helped develop and deliver a program that was designed to help certified elementary teachers gain an endorsement to teach mathematics at the middle school level. This was necessary for some teachers because they were teaching, quotes, out of field, and to be highly qualified under the No Child Left Behind Act, they needed to have a formal certification in the subject areas they were teaching at the middle school level. So this program demonstrated merit in the following ways. First, it was aligned with external standards. Second, it was approved by a program review panel at the Michigan Department of Education. Third, the courses were team taught by mathematics professors, education professors, and middle school teachers. So you had one of each of those kinds of persons teaching in a team of 3 for all courses. And at the end of the program, all participants were able to pass the certification exam in mathematics for elementary teachers. So we had pretty good evidence that the program had merit, that it was of high quality, and that it was doing what it was designed to do, that is, to help prepare teachers so that they could be highly qualified to teach mathematics in the middle school. But the other aspect that we need to consider is the worth. That's the other value we consider, the merit and the worth. Worth refers to whether or not the evaluand renders excellent services in an area of need. So it's not enough just to be really good. The program also needs to meet specific needs in specific contexts. So in the example I was talking about, this Andrews University Math Endorsement Program, in spite of the merits of that program, it was only offered for one cycle. That is, we taught all of the courses once, and then the program stopped. After the first cycle, there were inadequate numbers of teachers from the Berrien County area who needed this math endorsement to justify offering the courses anymore. And we shouldn't have been surprised by this phenomenon because the same thing had been observed about a decade earlier when Western Michigan University ran a similar program for Berrien County schools. And after that program was operated on one cycle, then there were not enough teachers who needed this specialized training in order to justify doing the program again. So in the example of this math endorsement program, it was evaluated high in terms of merit, in terms of quality and doing what and it was designed to do and reaching the goals it had set for itself. However, in terms of worth, while it met a short-term specific need, it was not a program that was needed for a long-term situation. Probably by the end, probably within another 5 years, it might be necessary again, because every 10 to 15 years it seems we run into a crisis in this county with not having enough certified math teachers for the middle school. So merit and worth. Let's look a little bit at how Dan Stufflebeam and Tony Shinkfield talk about merit and worth and compare it. They have this nice chart that I pulled from their book, which I have used before in teaching my class, Evaluation Theory, Models, and Applications. In terms of merit, and these are parallel kinds of statements as we go across from each other, we can assess the merit of any object of interest. Any object that can be evaluated, we can assess its merit. However, there's no need to assess the worth of an object that hasn't demonstrated that it has merit. There's no need to waste our time trying to determine the worth of a very poor program, of a very poor policy, or of a very poor curriculum. That's just a waste of our time. So we can assess the merit of anything, but we only want to assess the worth of objects that have demonstrated that they have merit, that they are at an acceptable level of quality. Merit is focused on the intrinsic value of an object. Is it good? Does it do what it's supposed to do? Is it well designed? Is it a high quality program? Whereas worth is focused on the extrinsic value of an object. What do people outside of this program or this product or this policy, how do they view it? So merit focuses on intrinsic value, worth extrinsic value. Merit is focused on the object's quality, the object's level of excellence. However, worth is focused on that same quality or value within a given context. The importance of that program, the importance of that policy. Was this policy really needed, or did it really not make any impact? We can describe merit and worth as answering two different questions. Merit asks the question, and you seek to answer this as an evaluator, does the object do well what it is intended to do? Whereas worth asks, is the object of high quality and also something that the target group needs? So you'll notice in the worth question there's two parts. The first part is really the merit question, is the object of high quality? But then when we move into worth, we want to know, is this something that a target group needs? Stufflebeam likes to use the example of a transition, a career transition program that is hypothetical in some ways, but not that unusual to hear of. During times of economic downturn, often there will be people who have to transition from one career into another career. And Stufflebeam refers to a specialized program designed to help people who've lost their jobs become to receive the commercial driver's license so that they can become drivers of large trucks, of semis, and big rigs. So the example he gives with merit is whether or not when the people complete this program, if they're able to pass that driver's exam, both the written and the practical exam, if they are all able to do that, then the program has done a good job at preparing truck drivers. However, what determines the worth of that project is whether or not these people who get their commercial driver's license are then able to find employment in the field. That will determine its worth. Now, in terms of the kinds of standards that are used to help us determine an object's merit or an object's worth, they differ slightly between the two types of evaluation. In terms of merit, we are looking at the standards that are generally accepted, the quality standards that are generally accepted for that type of object that's being evaluated. We're wanting to base our conclusions on those standards, so we're going to use the standards to rate the object. And we can compare the object with the standards exclusively, or we can compare the object with other competitive objects. So that sounds a little fuzzy, doesn't it? So let's use something a little more practical. For example, if I want to evaluate the program, if I want to evaluate the merit of the program that I'm actually directing here at Andrews, the Curriculum Instruction Graduate Program, I can try to determine the merit of that program by looking at standards for curriculum instruction programs, which we do, and those have been developed by the American Association for the Advancement of Curriculum Studies. But we can also compare our program with other competing programs, and that's something that I'm currently in the process of doing for a university requirement here for program review. And so in that case, we're going to be looking to see how our program compares not to those standards which we've shown that we meet, but to other competing programs. Now, when we look at worth, and we're talking about standards, not only do we want to keep these quality standards in mind, but we have to have some data from a needs assessment to show that there is actual need for this program. So it's not just enough to document the quality of the program, which, as I mentioned before, is what we're really focusing on in merit. But when we move to worth, we want to document the need, and that's often done through a needs assessment. We also want to be able to rate the object on its importance and value to a particular group. Is this program or policy or product providing a valuable service to a specific consumer group, a specific target population? And we need to be able to make conclusions about whether or not the object is actually of value to that group that it's targeting. Assessments of worth can be comparative, so you can compare to other programs, or they can be non-comparative, because remember, in worth you're looking at the need. So as long as you can document that a program is meeting a specific need, there's really no need to compare it to any other kinds of programs. Now, one question that I'm often asked by people who are new to the field of program evaluation is, what does it take to be an evaluator? And how do you know if you're good enough to be an evaluator? And how do you know if an evaluator is good or if an evaluator is bad? And for that purpose, in the field of evaluation, thought leaders have been working over the past few decades to create standards for program evaluation, as well as guiding principles for evaluation. And so the standards for program evaluation have been developed by what's called the Joint Committee, and you can read more about that in your textbook if you like. And these standards are briefly outlined in Appendix A of your Remember, this is one of the ways that evaluation differs from research. In research, we're focusing on validity, generalizability kinds of issues primarily, whereas in program evaluation, those things are important to a certain extent, but we have to look at a broader picture. And so, for example, in the area of utility, there are 8 utility standards, and I'll just list them shortly for you because you can read more about them in your textbook, and you can search online and find full text of them. The first standard under utility is evaluator credibility. So this starts to directly answer the question, how do we know if an evaluator is good or bad? Or if we want to personalize it, how do I know if I can be a good evaluator? And the general statement associated with evaluator credibility is that evaluations should be conducted by qualified people who establish and maintain credibility in the evaluation context. Well, you may wonder what is qualified. What is qualified is determined by the kind of training and experience you have. And you have to be able to clearly understand what you are capable of doing as a professional and what services you can provide to some organization that needs an evaluation conducted, and make sure that you only promise what you are able to deliver. As long as you can deliver what you promise, then you will be credible. The rest of the utility standards are attention to stakeholders, negotiated purposes, explicit values, relevant information, meaningful processes and products, timely and appropriate communicating and reporting, and concern for consequences and influence. I think particularly for those of us who are studying evaluation at a Christian university, this standard number 4, which deals with explicit values, is an important one to keep in mind. And the idea behind explicit values as a standard is that within our evaluations, we need to make clear and specific both the individual and cultural values that underlie whatever it is that we are evaluating. It's not reasonable or realistic to think that we can go into a place and expect to find a value-neutral kind of setting. There's no such thing. We need to make sure that we can understand what those values are. The second area of standards for program evaluation are feasibility. Feasibility, when I was studying program evaluation, my professor referred to it as possibility or doability. Is this even something that we could possibly do? You don't want to try to plan an evaluation that is impossible to conduct. So there are 4 standards under feasibility. Project management. So to make an evaluation feasible, you do have to be able to manage the project. You have to have a plan for managing the project. Standard 2, practical procedures. Again, this is where evaluation differs slightly from research. We don't do things just because they sound interesting or theoretically we wonder if those might be important. If they have no practical use for the stakeholders, then there's really no reason to include those. Standard 3 is contextual viability. So in this case, you're looking at ways so that you can balance the cultural and political interests and needs of the individuals and groups. And then the fourth standard for feasibility has to do with effective and efficient use of resources, including finances and time. Propriety is the third area of standards. This has to do with the area of ethics and ethical behavior. It also has some standards in here that will protect you as an evaluator, such as Standard 2, formal agreements between the evaluator and the person who contracts with the evaluator. I'm not going to talk a lot about the area of propriety because Chapter 3 has some specific content about that quite more in depth. The fourth area of standards for program evaluation is that of accuracy. And this is the closest you get to seeing research kind of language. So you'll see things like justified conclusions, valid information. So valid, there's a big research word. Reliable information, reliable is a big research word. Explicit program and context descriptions. And this is almost case study kind of language here. So evaluations, when you're evaluating programs, you need to document them. You need to be explicit. You need to talk about the context in which they occur. There is a standard for sound design and analyses. So again, we're getting into research language there. However, evaluation design is slightly different than research design, as you would expect. Explicit evaluation, reasoning, communication, and reporting. And I skipped one up there that was Standard 5, information management. It's very important that you're able to manage information, because in evaluation you generally collect many different types of data. A lot of those are stored, if you're going to be efficient with it, they're stored on computer nowadays, and they're analyzed with some kind of technology. Often databases are created to organize and to help analyze your evaluation data. So if you're lacking, and you know you're lacking in technology skills with the use of spreadsheets or the use of SPSS or any other statistical package or qualitative analysis software, it will be a good thing for you to find ways to develop your skills in those areas, because if you're going to be serious about evaluation, you will need to have those kinds of skills. The fifth area of standards has to do with evaluation accountability, and there are 3 standards here. The first is documentation. You should be able to clearly document, just as you would for research, clearly document how you did what you did. You should be able to clearly document how and why you chose your design, how you implemented the design, the procedures, the kinds of data you collected, the outcomes, and how you arrived at your conclusions. The other 2 standards in evaluation accountability have to do with meta-evaluation. Meta-evaluation is a special term that refers to the evaluation of evaluations. So there are 2 kinds of meta-evaluation, one of which you should always do, and one of which you're encouraged to do when at all possible. So the one that you should always do is internal meta-evaluation. So the idea is that you actually use these standards to go back and review your work and evaluate your work as an evaluator, and evaluate your work on a specific project. An external meta-evaluation would be where you would find someone external to your actual evaluation team and have them use these program evaluation standards or the American Evaluation Association's guiding principles or a similar set of standards to evaluate your evaluation. So that's the idea behind evaluation accountability. Let's look briefly at the AEA guiding principles. AEA stands for the American Evaluation Association. It's an excellent organization to belong to. They're fairly active in social media. I'm a member. They have lots of things going on all the time, and there are free coffee break seminars that they call them, where you can sit and listen to specific topics. They have them going every week. As long as you're a member, there's no charge to join, and you can just sit in and join them on your computer. These guiding principles have some similarities to the program evaluation standards, but they're not meant to replace the standards. These two sets of documents, the standards and the principles, are meant to complement one another, and to allow evaluators to work a little more effectively and confidently and professionally. So you can see the 5 areas here. Systematic inquiry, this is related to the researchy kind of aspects. Competence, again, some have asked specifically, you know, how do you develop competence? How do you know what is competence? You need to know what it is that you are competent in. And for example, if you have no ability to conduct qualitative research, you should not enter into an evaluation contract that will, you know, require a mixed methods design or something like that, where you're expected to interview people and come up with findings based on those interviews, because you haven't developed the competence in order to do that. Similarly, if you know that you're weak in statistical analysis and the evaluation plan calls for a complex kind of analysis of data, if you are not capable of doing that analysis, then you shouldn't enter into a contract to do that evaluation. Now, you may be thinking, well, what do I do? I can't be competent in everything. That's why we collaborate. That's why we work in evaluation teams often. And so some teams work in tandem with a quantitative researcher and a qualitative researcher. Right now I'm working with Dr. Kajai in the School of Education. He's handling the quantitative portion of a study we're conducting, and I'm doing the qualitative portion in a grounded theory design. So that's one way that you can help expand your competence, is to work on teams. The other principles include integrity and honesty, which I think speaks for itself, although you'll be interested to look in the appendix and see that there's almost a full page that talks about what integrity and honesty means in an evaluation context. So this is an important one, I think, for us to look at and pay attention to. Part D is respect for people, and then the 5th principle is responsibilities for general and public welfare. You'll be receiving an inbox task that will help you address some of these guiding principles during our class, and so it'll be interesting to see how you respond to some of these guiding principles. I hope that you enjoy your time in this class with me, and be sure to ask questions and continue to keep track of what it is that you don't know that you want to know. In future video lectures, I'll be sharing some answers to questions that you have posed, as well as presenting what I hope will be some insights into the concepts presented in the textbook, as well as some practical examples from my own work as an evaluator. Well, goodbye, and you have a blessed day, and I will be talking to you soon.